This was the 6-year-old boy's first time rushing onto the battlefield. In the midst of gunfire, he delivered bullets to the soldiers fighting on the front lines, even braving the hail of bullets to connect the only telephone line with the outside world. A slight misstep could have meant certain death. Yet just a few days ago, he was sitting in a tree enjoying the afternoon sun, but in the middle of the night a neighbor urgently woke him from his dreams, hastily packing things and pushing him out the window. Shortly afterward, the neighbor was shot dead by the enemy. Now he ran frantically, continuously shouting for his mother. Behind him the village was engulfed in roaring flames. He turned around yelling incessantly, but the distant barking of dogs forced him to flee into the forest. Now hiding in a tree hollow, he spotted several German soldiers resting by the river. Terrified boy didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Meanwhile, a snake was slithering above his head. He tightly covered his mouth, fearing his own cries might attract the enemy. He knew these enemies were even more dangerous than the poisonous snake. When the danger passed, he seized the leftover canned food from the enemy and ran. This was his only sustenance in these days. Afterwards, he wandered through the forest, wrapping tree bark around his torn shoes to keep walking, eating wild fruits to stave off hunger, collecting rainwater to quench his thirst, picking up tree branches as weapons when night falls. But gradually, due to exhaustion, he fainted. It was unclear how much time passed until reconnaissance soldiers discovered the boy and carried him back to their camp. The boy nervously placed his hands on his chest. The commander asked the boy's name. The boy immediately said his name was Sergei. When asked about his parents' whereabouts, Sergei teared up. As the people around learned about his experience, they handed over their snacks and fruits to him. Soon Sergei was taken to a field hospital. Under the care of the nurses, he recovered quickly. The commander frequently visited Sergei, even giving him his own sidearm to play with. His presence brought joy to the field hospital, and many soldiers came with gifts to visit him. At that moment, he became every soldier's little darling, warming the hearts of the soldiers with his innocent childlike spirit. The nurse hoped the child could stay, but the commander firmly opposed, because he didn't know what tomorrow will bring. A few days later, Sergei fully recovered. He was to be sent to an orphanage, though the commander was reluctant. Staying in the orphanage would at least ensure his safety. Before leaving, the commander specially carved a wooden pistol for him. As if sensing his own fate, Sergei hugged the commander. The boy's words pierced the commander's heart. He made the decision to adopt Sergei as his son. At that moment, the boy seemed to have found his own family. The soldiers, upon hearing the news, were particularly delighted, and they worked overnight to create new military uniform for him. The 6-year-old boy received his military uniform for the first time. To become a qualified soldier, he had to wear it neatly before the matchstick burned out. Under his father's supervision, Sergei successfully became a soldier. He joyfully ran outside and everyone saluted him. Suddenly, enemy bombers flew overhead. Sergei was unaware of the impending danger. Seeing this, command rushed over, grabbed him, and threw him into the trench. At that moment, Sergei finally realized the horror of war. After the bombing, all the casualties were urgently taken for treatment. Sergei wanted to help, but the doctor scolded him for not causing trouble. Undeterred, Sergei ran to the barracks to give water to the soldiers. A soldier with blinded eyes from the blast took out a letter and asked Sergei to read it to him.
Пишут вам, что вас очень любят, что корова ваша здорова.
Sergei's words made the wounded soldiers burst into laughter. The letter had been read countless times, but they liked Sergei and used this as a way to keep him busy. Later, other injured soldiers also took out letters for him to read. Sergei told his father that he wanted to thank the soldier who made his military uniform. His father took him to a shell hole where he saw a broken sewing machine. Emulating his father, he took off his hat and saluted. At that moment, the scars of war were written on Sergei's face, and he was determined to do something. Since war couldn't be avoided, he hoped it would end soon. So he found an orderly one day wanting to contribute in his own way. He distributed letters to everyone, carrying a small bag and navigating the trenches. Soldiers loved this little boy. He danced with them, bringing joy to all. But sometimes when letters couldn't be delivered, he would solemnly remove his hat for a moment of silence. Sometimes he used binoculars to observe the surroundings. And surprisingly, he found black boots hidden in a haystack with enemy soldiers inside. He quickly informed a soldier who initially thought he was joking. Sergei's serious demeanor made them nervous, and they followed him to the haystack. The soldiers set it on fire and discovered German soldiers inside. In a matter of moments, the enemies were subdued. Sergei retrieved their backpack from nearby and upon inspection found their radio, then intercepted the imminent telegraph. Sergei's brave act directly saved the fate of this unit. Later, he was praised by his father for being very clever. 6-year-old Sergei carried a box of ammunition and moved through the trenches. He wanted to help the soldiers in this way.
За подход, конечно, тебе спасибо. Но лучше пошел-ка ты сейчас к командиру в блиндаж. Так, боец, Шишкин, выполняйте приказ. Штабной блиндаж, шагом марш!
Есть выполнять.
Inside the command post, Sergei accidentally heard the phone line being cut by an explosion, so he used his hands to untangle the wires, bravely climbed out of the trench and found the critically wounded signalman. The signalman on the verge of death told him how to connect the wires. In this way, Sergei successfully joined the two wires together. Meanwhile, the signalman in the command post contacted reinforcements, successfully averting the danger. Sergei once again created his own glory. A few days later, the troops received an order to relocate. Accidentally, a transport vehicle ran over a landmine, creating a terrifying blast that overturned nearby soldiers. In the thick smoke, Sergei Sergei found his father, who, though not in mortal danger, was seriously injured. After a long journey, the main forces finally reunited. Sergei, as usual, approached his father to receive a new task.
Какой он сегодня у меня будет?
Вот что, боец Шишкин, отправлю-ка я тебя во вторую роту. Проверять обмундирование и снаряжение. Справишься?
Здесь справится.
Having received the task, Sergei happily ran outside, and the general, through the commander, learned about this young boy. He handed over the adoption papers to the general. By now, Sergei had arrived at the parade ground, where everyone was delighted to see him. Some even took out chocolates they carried with them and gave them to him. He wanted to take them but hesitated, keeping his hands behind his back as he had to execute the commander's orders. Upon hearing this, the platoon leader immediately became serious. Organizing all the soldiers into a neat formation, he requested those with incomplete equipment to step forward, then had the platoon leader record their names, and hurriedly went to report. The general was pleased to see this and proposed a commendation.
На пожениться моему папе и нашей Кате.
His father, torn between joy and caution, thought his son was truly amazing. With the victory of this battle, the general personally awarded Sergei a medal. Everyone watched the young boy. Even though his marching was somewhat immature, his confident and spirited demeanor was incredibly charming. After the war ended, he returned to his hometown with his father.